The story begins with two twin sisters who were so identical that even their mother couldn't tell them apart. Although at least their father and grandmother could tell them apart because even though they were physically identical, their personalities were very different from each other. Miggy is very outgoing and strong. She always says what she thinks. Meyer, on the other hand, is more shy and reserved. Also, her body is more fragile. She gets sick very easily. When they turned 12, their father unfortunately died, and the only person who could tell them apart was their grandmother. That's why the girls decided to use that to their advantage. When there were things they didn't want to do or didn't like to do, they would switch places. Look, I was very good at school, but Miggy wasn't so much, so during exams, they would switch places. And since they were twins, no one noticed the difference. But one day, during a medical exam, they were found out. And to make sure they wouldn't do it again, their mother decided to cut Miggy's hair. That way, they could tell her apart from Meyer. Since then, they liked being different. Meyer was the star at school, but Miggy wasn't so much. That made her feel a little bad. But one day, her teacher noticed she was very fast, so she became a runner. And thanks to her physical condition, she won many medals. Because of that, her confidence grew, and she stopped being in her sister's shadow. But, unfortunately for her, in the most important race of her life, she ended up getting injured. Many years later, we see that because of this injury, Miggy lost her spark. That bright future everyone saw in her had vanished. Now, she was a part-time worker at the school where she had studied. But even though things didn't turn out as she expected, she still had the same good vibes as always. She did her job as best as she could. Although her mother wasn't very happy about it, it wasn't the future she had hoped for her daughter, especially when compared to her other daughter. Meyer took the civil service exam and got a job at an important state-owned company. Now, both of them were 30 years old. Miri had found her path, but Miggy still didn't really know what to do with her life. That's why she took whatever job she could, did everything to survive, but she didn't have the stability that everyone expected from her. That day, while she was taking another job, her best friend told her that there was a rookie farmer looking for staff. He recommends that she apply because the pay is very good. She agrees, but she had to send a resume. Even though Miggy had a lot of experience from having many jobs, she almost never wrote resumes. Later, her mother tells her that it's time for her to find a stable job, but Miggy tells her that she's trying, even though she hasn't had any luck. Then, her mother orders her to take some snacks to the neighbor's house because it was the ceremony for her late husband. When she goes out, we meet Yosu, a very sweet boy whom Miggy liked when she was in high school. But they never ended up dating, although she seemed to still have feelings for him. But she gets over it when the boy asks her about her sister. It turns out that when they were young, he moved away in the middle of the year. And since Miggy was very outgoing, she tried to be his friend. But Josu was too cold and reserved. No matter how hard she tried to be his friend, he always ignored her. That's why she started to hate him. But one day, while playing, Miggy threw the ball to him. And Josu's reaction was very strange. He acted crazy and started walking weirdly. It turns out he was disabled. The worst part is that Josu's mother had told Miggy, or at least that's what she thought, but actually she told Meyer, since they looked the same. She thought she was the one who was told. Josu thought she knew, and that she still liked to bother him anyway. When Miggy found out about all this, she felt very sorry, and she felt very embarrassed every time she remembered it. When they cleared up the misunderstanding, they both became very good friends. Back to the present, we meet Seijin, the owner of the strawberry farm who was looking for staff. When he sees Mir's careless resume, he becomes intrigued and is even more convinced. When a man speaks well of her, he tells him that she has a lot of experience in the field, since she has never left the village. He asks him why a girl like that would be unemployed, and the man tells him it's because of her grandmother. She suffered a stroke, and now she's hospitalized. Miggy couldn't get a full-time job because every afternoon she went to take care of her. Seijin decides to give her a try because she reminds him a lot of someone he knows. Later, Miggy calls her sister because she wanted her to visit their grandmother. But her sister, in a rather rude way, tells her she doesn't have time. Miggy insists because their grandmother's condition is getting worse, but her sister tells her no again. When she tells her mother about it, she takes her sister's side and tells her not to pressure her, since she pays most of the hospital bills. She also asks her to bring her food because she felt bad that her daughter works so much and helps her with the expenses. The next day, even though she didn't want to, Miggy had to go to Seoul to bring food to her twin sister. When she arrives, Mir acts very strangely, Not in the cold and distant way she spoke to her on the phone, but in person. She is sweet and attentive, which makes Miggy very worried because she knows something is wrong. Her suspicions are confirmed when she talks about the possibility of quitting and returning to her hometown. Miggy tells her not to do it and not to live like she does. Then she goes to the bathroom, but when she returns to the table, her sister had already left. Since she left the food, she had to take it home. There she discovers something terrifying. Her sister was thinking about jumping from her apartment, but she didn't want to end her life. That was to ask for medical leave. Right before she falls, Miggy arrives, who manages to save her, or at least tries to, because in the end, both of them fell, although she managed to keep her from getting seriously hurt. Once they're safe, Miggy tells her not to even think about doing things like that because she's her twin sister and she can't imagine a life without her. After calming down, she demands that she tell her what's going on. Meyer tells her that she's being harassed at work. It turns out that when Meyer arrived at the office, her direct supervisor was nice to her, but the head of the department was very mean, especially to the supervisor. When she tried to report him, the whole office turned against her. They ignored her and gave her a lot of extra work. In the end, she became an outcast. Meyer tried to help her and supported her with the complaint, but her boss couldn't handle the pressure anymore and ended up resigning. That's why Meyer took her position and also became an outcast. Her so-called colleagues gave her a lot of work and sabotaged her whenever they could, so she got tired and wanted to give up. But since she had a lot of bills to pay, she didn't dare to quit. So hurting herself to get a medical leave was the best solution she could find. Miggy, furious, tells her not to be stupid and that if she can't face them, then she will. She tells her to switch places, like in the old days. That way, look, she'll be able to go rest in the countryside and Miggy will be able to get a break from the pressure others put on her. Look, she was desperate, so she accepts her sister's proposal. Later, they go to the hair salon, Miggy gets extensions, and look, she cuts her hair, although the latter was very afraid of being discovered. But her sister tells her not to worry, it will only be for a few days, until she feels better. The next day, Miggy has to get up early for the first time and follow a routine. Although she thought she had arrived on time, her classmates got there before her, just to leave her outside. When she entered the meeting, her boss and her coworkers looked at her strangely, but Miggy wasn't bothered. Look, she was more shameless and didn't notice they wanted to make her uncomfortable. For her part, Mir was able to sleep in for the first time in a long while. She would have slept longer, but her mother woke her up. She wanted her to do something with her life. She didn't like her staying in bed all day. Just like in the past, Mrs. O didn't realize that her daughters had switched places. Later, she has to go to the strawberry farm, but since it's far away, she goes by bicycle, even though Meyer has never ridden one before. When she arrives to meet the seed seller, he tells her she's acting very strange. But Senji arrives to save her and tells him that she's going to work with him. He also clarifies that he's not looking for an employee, but a partner. Someone to take care of the strawberry farm. For him as a future partner, she will have absolute freedom. She can come and go whenever she wants. For his part, we see that Yosu was handling a case. He had to defend an abusive boss who beat his employees very hard. Even though he didn't like it, he was willing to do it just to be successful. His boss tells him that's the best thing, since he considers compassion a weakness. In the afternoon, Miggy fulfills the fantasy we've all had at some point. He leaves right when the clock strikes 6 o'clock. While his other coworkers stay to keep working, the next day he does the same. But in reality, he wasn't working. He was just pretending to do something to waste time. Mir, on the other hand, actually wanted to work since her boss was paying her for doing nothing, and because of that, she felt bad. Days later, Miggy was tired of doing nothing. That's why, when her boss told her they needed someone to take charge of a very important project, she accepted without hesitation. Her task was to convince an owner to sell her place so they could build a huge building. But it turned out that it was all a trap, because the lady was very special. No one ever entered her restaurant alone. There always had to be an owner, didn't there? And she went in with a man who told her to eat and then say what she had to say. She didn't dare say anything, and it turned out that the food was really delicious. After finishing, she introduced herself and showed all the purchase documents. However, the lady refused to act and threw salt in her face. To ward off bad luck, Miggy was very stubborn and didn't want to get her sister in trouble. So day after day, she went to the restaurant to hand over the documents, but the lady wouldn't accept them. and every time she went, she threw more and more salt at her. Meyer, for her part, was also tired of not working. So she started cleaning as much as she could, but by mistake, she threw away Senji's late grandfather's chair. He gets angry because he never asked her to do anything. He tells her that it was all a test to see who she really was. Meyer was tired, and she tells him that he can't hire her and then ask her not to do anything. Angry, she tries to go home, but since she didn't know how to ride, she falls off the bicycle. For his part, Miggy had blisters on his feet because he walked a lot from the office to the store. Even so, he thought it was better than sitting all day in his office doing nothing. On the way, he runs into Josu, who thinks he is Meyer. So he tells him they need to talk about the lawsuit he filed against his company. Miggy doesn't understand what he's talking about, but still agrees to talk to him. Later, he tells his sister about it. She tells him not to see Yosu because when they were in school, Yosu was able to tell them apart. Miggy promises her that he won't go see him. But since he still has feelings for him, in the end, he has no choice but to agree to see him on the weekend. He also remembers that when they were young, they had promised to go to many places together. When the day comes for them to meet, Miggy wanted to go to a very popular restaurant. But because of Yosu's condition, he couldn't be in noisy places, so they decided to go to the Han River instead. Miggy gets really excited, and Yosu thinks it's really strange because, look, he would never act like that. Miggy tells him he's overreacting and not to say silly things, then explains why he was so worried. It turns out that Meyer had filed a complaint against her superior, but later withdrew the complaint. Josu had gone as an external investigator, but since she withdrew the complaint, he couldn't continue investigating. Meiji tells him it's unimportant and he shouldn't get involved where he's not wanted. The next day, Mrs. O found out that Meyer had quit the farm, so she sent her to take care of her grandmother. Meyer didn't want to do it because she was one of the few people who could tell the twins apart, but when she arrived, her grandmother didn't recognize her. Or at least that's what she believed, since when they're alone, her grandmother asks why she swapped places with her sister. Meyer admits she left because she couldn't bear Seoul anymore. Her grandmother reassures her that everything will be all right. Meiji, on the other hand, was being scolded. Her superior wanted her to get results, but the shop owner was too stubborn. No matter how much Meiji asked for a chance, the lady barely listened to her. For his part, Yosu was having problems, since his boss's ruthless attitude seemed too cruel to him. It turns out that he sent him to Meyer's case on purpose because he knew they studied together, and if something went wrong, he could use that to win the case. So in the afternoon, he tells Meiji everything and says that meeting her again helped him remember himself. He knows that what he was doing wasn't right, so from now on, he wants to take the time to correct his path. Later, we see that the lady from the store calls Meiji to tell her that she will give her 10 minutes to hear what she has to say. Meiji gets very excited, and Josu realizes that she's actually not Miere, but her twin sister Meiji. However, she gets upset to cover it up and tells him not to say nonsense. Here he remembers that something similar happened when they were young. It turns out that Josu was in love with Meiji, but he never had the courage to confess his love to her. Also, we see that when Meiji hurt her leg, it was because she saw her sister hugging Josu. That's why she tripped and her sports career ended. The next day, Meiji goes to see Mrs. Rosa, but she tells her that she's not going to sell her place. She just called her because she's out of salt. For her part, Mir had made up with Senji. Now they will start the strawberry project together. But before arriving, her sister's best friend takes her to a hidden place to show her something very special. When he takes off his shirt, Meyer gets scared because she thinks he wants to do something dirty. But in reality, he's just showing her his new tattoo. She tells him it's very nice, but that he shouldn't go around showing his private parts. When they get to her job, the guy doesn't understand why she's acting so weird. When he asks her for an explanation, Senji arrives and kindly asks the guy to leave because he's making his partner uncomfortable. Then, the two of them have to choose their plants, and apparently Meyer knew a lot more than she let on. Back with Meiji, she was following Mrs. Rosa because even though she told her no, she didn't have anything better to do. That's how she found out that she was a famous poet, and even a winner of several awards. After reading one of her poems, Meiji was enchanted, but when the lady discovers her, she runs away. Although because she was in a hurry, she ends up tripping and tries to pretend that she was there by coincidence, although the lady obviously doesn't believe her. Later, she calls Yosu to ask him if Mrs. Rosa can sue her for following her. Josu tells her that's not possible, but Meiji already knew that. She just called him so she could see him. Then Josu tells her that he knows Mrs. Rosa, since she graduated from the same university as him. And not only that, but she also has many important poems. In addition, she has a scholarship called Kim Rosa for students who have only one parent. Josu was one of the beneficiaries, that's why he knows her very well. Meiji tells him to help her since she's sure that, because he received her scholarship, at least she'll listen to him for a moment. The next day, Meiji goes to Mrs. Rosa to give her a fish tank as an apology for having followed her without her permission. Seeing her determination, Mrs. Rosa starts treating her better. Then she tells her that her friend received one of her scholarships, and thanks to it, he was able to finish his degree. Mrs. Rosa was very happy, although she tried to hide it. Then they inform her that the cleaning lady won't be able to come. So Meiji takes the opportunity and starts cleaning the house. But when she finishes, the lady, instead of thanking her, scolds her and tells her not to do things nobody asks her to do. Meiji apologizes and says she just wanted to earn her favor, and cleaning is one of the few things she knows how to do well. Upon hearing this, Mrs. Rosa feels bad, but she knows that if she doesn't put a stop to it, the company she works for will keep sending young people to do her job. Dirty work. Meiji thinks it's over, that once again he has failed. Just like when he was young and took off the cast from his injured leg. He tried to run by force and it came off again. But that injury was worse because it was the injury that ended his career. That's why he gets depressed and goes home. Very sad. But later, Josu calls her and tells her to come see him because he ran into a friend from school. But when she arrives, Meiji finds out that they had met at a blind date. So she decides to go with her, so she won't leave her alone with Josu. Later, she has her friend take her to Mrs. Rosa's restaurant, since she had to return the key she accidentally took. To avoid suspicion, she tells her friend she's her great aunt. The next day, Josu had breakfast with his boss. He thought things had already been sorted out, but in reality, his boss wanted him to change to another law firm, one that handles public interest cases, meaning cases where they help the victims and not people with money. Josu tells him that he doesn't want to do it because he wants to keep working with him, but his boss tells him that he can't be true to his principles and do a good job at the same time. Because in his law firm, the only thing that matters is winning at any cost. For his part, Miggy's boss tells him that he needs to hurry with the store owner. He gives him a deadline of 1 week for the lady to go to the company. But Miggy didn't know how to get her to go since the lady kept treating her badly. Also, her friend calls her and says that her aunt's restaurant is very unique. That's why she wants to go eat there to make content and post it on her social media. When she hears this, Miggy runs out because she didn't want to bother Mrs. Rosa anymore. But when she arrives, Mrs. Rosa catches them red-handed. Jian says they've been friends since school and she knows she's her great aunt. For some reason, instead of getting upset, Mrs. Rosa decides to play along so she doesn't make Miggy look like a liar. She feels touched and thanks her for being so kind to her. Then, Mrs. Rosa also agrees to meet with the company. But it wasn't because she was kind, it was because she was already tired of Miggy coming every day. That's why she wanted to tell them no. For once, Miggy was very touched, because this way her boss would stop bothering her. Then she goes to look for the key she left at a nearby store. But later Josu arrives, and we see that Mrs. Rosa completely changes her attitude. She treats Josu very well. You could even say she's affectionate. Miggy takes the opportunity to ask Josu why he agreed to go and if at first he didn't want to help her. He tells her that now he can put his ideals before his job because, in the end, he ended up quitting the law firm. She tells him that she didn't ask him to do that, but he replies that he'll help her no matter what she says. The next day, Miggy's bosses congratulate her for getting Mrs. Rosa to agree to meet with them. But in reality, it was a trap. They knew she wouldn't sell her building, and they were planning to blame her for everything. Miggy had heard all of that and wanted Mrs. Rosa to sell the building. That's why she goes to her to ask, but when she arrives, she doesn't have the courage to do it. Because she had prepared food for her, she had also prepared some for Josu, and Miggy was supposed to go give it to him when she went to see him. He was very depressed because he had been looking for a job, but even though he had an excellent resume, nobody wanted to hire him. Miggy tells him that he needs a hobby, at least while he's unemployed. So she teaches him how to knit so he can relax a little. It works for Josu, but he finds it strange that she's acting like this. Meanwhile, in the village, Senji wanted to buy a seat for Mirei, but his grandfather's friends start teasing him and advise him not to pressure the girl so much. Or could she disappear like last time? He gets worried and starts asking her all kinds of personal questions, trying to break the ice. But Mir felt uncomfortable, so she leaves him talking to himself. At the same time, Yosu finds out that his former boss was the one sabotaging him and told the other law firms not to hire him. Later, while she was knitting, she runs into Mrs. Rosa. It turns out that Miggy had arranged for both of them to meet so they could help each other. She needed to buy some things and he needed to pass the time. So they keep each other company and have a pleasant afternoon together. Mrs. Rosa tells him he no longer needs to look for a job because she wants him as her legal representative. The next day in the village, the nurses tell Meyer to cut her grandmother's hair and to reopen her beauty salon. It turns out that her twin sister had a unique talent for cutting hair. Sometime later, the alumni dinner takes place. Miggy was very nervous because since she got injured, she hadn't seen her classmates again. She felt that everyone looked down on her and thought less of her for no longer being an athlete. That's why she got depressed and locked herself in her room for 2 years. Now she would see them again, but she would pretend to be her twin sister. Miggy notices how they treat her differently just because now she's Meyer. Then her classmates start talking about those who didn't come to the reunion, including Miggy. Everyone thought she would be the most successful in school because she was very sociable and talented, but then they start talking about how she didn't go to college and only gets part-time jobs. Because of that, Yosu gets upset and says they shouldn't discuss people who aren't present. After they leave, Yosu is angry with her for not defending her twin sister. When she gets home, Miggy feels bad about what happened at the gathering. But Mireille calls her and tells her she needs to send money to pay for their grandmother's hospital bills. She also tells her to come see her on Friday, but she replies that she can't. Because of that, for the first time, Mira feels the way her twin sister used to feel, and Miggy feels the same way. That's why they both get angry. It's the first time they see things from each other's perspective. The next day, Mrs. Rosa was going to the company to tell them she wouldn't sell her restaurant, but when she tried to pick up her purse, she ended up falling. And since she's older, she suffered an injury. The pain was so intense that she couldn't even move. For his part, Miggy was starting to get worried, so he called Chosu to see if he knew anything about Mrs. Rosa. He tells him no, and that she isn't answering the phone either, so he decides to go to her store to see what's going on. When he arrives, he finds her lying on the ground, but Miggy, instead of helping her, is paralyzed. Luckily, Josu arrives and manages to call an ambulance. At the hospital, Mrs. Rosa wasn't that bad, and she could be discharged in a couple of days. Now we find out why Miggy was paralyzed. When she locked herself in her room, only her grandmother supported and defended her for those 2 years. But one day, while she was going to the market, she fell and ended up hurting her back. Since she was very scared, she didn't know how to help her. If it hadn't been for her twin sister, her grandmother would have lost her life. That's why when she saw Mrs. Rosa, she was paralyzed, because it was exactly the same scene. Then she tells all of this to Josu. She says that Miggy feels very guilty, and that's why she takes such good care of her grandmother. It's her way of making up for not being able to help her. But Yosu tells her that it's not her fault, that it's nobody's fault. Accidents just happen and no one can prevent them. Later, she asks Josu why he defends Miggy so much. And he tells her it's because he likes her and because she was his first love. When she hears this, Miggy is shocked because she never imagined that the boy she likes was also in love with her. That's why she asks him since when she has been his first love. But he gets a call and can't answer her anymore. A few days later, the director of planning arrives and asks for a full report on the land they're buying. And, as expected, they give all the work to Miggy. Then we see that Mrs. Rosa had to have gallbladder surgery because they found stones in her x-ray. That's why Josu will now be in charge of the negotiations. At night, Miggy was looking for someone to do the reports, but couldn't find anyone who could do it. Also, she couldn't tell her sister, so she had no choice but to do it herself. Then her grandmother calls her. Miggy starts complaining and says she wants to go back to the village, but her grandmother asks her to hold on a little longer. The next day, someone from the office had helped her with the data. For her report, it turned out that it was the analyst who was very cold and curt with everyone. But with her, he was very kind. That's why Miggy takes the opportunity and asks him if she can help him with anything else. He says no, but she insists until he has no choice but to accept. Later, he gives her a lot of files so that Miggy can learn from scratch how to make a report. After days and days of hard work, Miggy manages to finish and makes a good report. Meanwhile, Yosu was talking with his friend since she loved gossip. She tells him that to clarify his feelings, he should go talk to his first love. That's why he goes back to the town and buys a gift for Miggy. But when he wants to talk to her, he's surprised to see her with Senji. When they finally get to talk, He notices that she's acting very strange. Because of that, he starts to suspect again that she is Myers. For her part, Miggy thanks the analyst who helped her with the report by treating him to a meal and asks him why he did it. He tells her that on his first day, she was the only person who helped him. That's why he calls his sister to ask her how exactly she helped him. She tells him she doesn't remember, she just did her job and was kind. Then he asks her about the rumors that she and Yosu were dating. Mirai tells him that nothing ever happened between the two of them. Miggy feels bad because all this time she thought the two of them liked each other. Even though they were twins, they didn't share things with each other. That's why Miggy feels even worse, because she thinks that maybe all this time she had misunderstood things. The next day, everyone in the village was talking about Senji's fight and Miggy's ex. That's why Josu's mom thinks that Miggy has finally matured, and that soon she'll marry the owner of the farm. But Miggy's mother gets very angry and tells her that her daughter isn't that easy. At the same time, in the office, the boss wanted to take all the credit for the negotiation, so he decides to take charge from now on. But Josu puts him in his place and tells him that if he wants to buy, he needs to improve his offer. And not only that, he should stop sending employees and go make the offer himself. At the end of the meeting, Miggy thanks him for his help. But Yosu felt uncomfortable and tells her that it's better if they're not seen together. Later, Miggy had submitted her report, but her boss tells her that it's poorly done as revenge for what happened in the meeting. Miggy was very sad because she had really put a lot of effort into that report. At night, Myers' mother asks her if she's dating the farmer. She says no, but her mother tells her about the rumors that have started to spread throughout the town. Because of that, she goes to Senji and tells him that she's going to quit. At the same time, Yosu was at Mrs. Rosa's restaurant. There, he runs into Yuyon. She invites him for a drink and then asks him if he liked her back in school. He says no, that it was just unfounded rumors. Since both of them were sick, they started spending more time together, but nothing else ever happened between them. Then we see that Miggy was disappointed and drinking. At that moment, the analyst runs into her and asks, "Why did you accept the decision, boss? Both of you knew the report was well done." She tells him that she prefers to pretend she didn't try rather than admit she did it wrong. He says he understands and asks her, "Why is that better?" She didn't take a break. She tells him that's very dangerous because the last time she did that, she ended up locked in her room for 2 years. When she realized she had to go out, it was already too late. She had gotten so used to it that she was afraid to go outside. Later, look, she was so drunk that she went to Josu's house. He asked her why she came to see him. Miggy forgot that she had switched places with her sister, so she drops the lie and acts like herself. She says he's been confusing her with talk about her being his first love. She asks him to clear things up right then. She wants to know when he fell in love with her. But Yosu was confused, so he confesses that it was when they climbed Mount Oban. He climbed even though he was disabled, and when he wanted to give up. Miggy was the only one who believed in him. That's why he pushed himself and managed to reach the top, even though deep down he didn't want to keep walking anymore. She tells him that he should have told her because she liked him too, but Yosu was confused. He didn't know if it was really Meyer or Miggy. The next day, Miggy wakes up in the boy's bed and remembers something he said. That's why she apologizes and asks him to forget what happened. Last night, Josu tells her that it's not a problem because something happened that she doesn't remember. Then she was running late for work, so she pretends that she already arrived and was just in the bathroom. But her boss says she must attend the meeting with the director because he planned to blame her if anything went wrong. But Miggy was already expecting something like that, so he answers everything and knew much more about the project. Because of this, the only ones who look bad are his bosses. When the superior sees she's the most prepared, he returns the project to her. Meanwhile, Yeon talks to Josu. She tells him that she needs him, but it was just an excuse to have a date with him. In the evening, she meets Miggy. When she sees them together on a date, she gets jealous and thinks that Yosu is just playing with her. At night, Meyer felt bad about quitting her job at the farm. Then she calls her sister and tells her what was going on. She tells her that she feels bad for putting all her problems on her. But Miggy tells her it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, it's not her. She knows that at some point they'll switch places again. Because of that, Miggy has to solve all her problems as soon as possible. So everything is ready when her sister comes back. At the same time, Yeon was bragging that she was dating Chosu, but her coworkers talk behind her back and reveal that they won't be renewing her contract. And also, one of them told Chosu that Yeon didn't actually work at that company, she was just an intern. When she talks to him, she thinks he went out with her just out of pity. But Yosu tells her that's not the case. He just had free time and nothing else to do. The next day, Miggy's boss convinces Josu's former boss to help him with the acquisition of the building. He knows his methods are questionable, but he always manages to win the cases. The lawyer asks to see Miggy to use Josu to his advantage. He knew the two of them knew each other, and he wanted to intimidate them so that in the end, Mrs. Rosa would sell the building. Miggy was anxious, but still wants to stay calm, at least in front of Mrs. Rosa. She had already recovered, although she was mean in the past, now her attitude had changed. She thanks Miggy for showing up that day. Otherwise, she would have died without anyone saving her. Then Josu arrives with Jian, and because of that, Miggy gets jealous again. That's why she asks her if she's interested in him. Jian answers that she is, and that this time she won't let him go. At least, not without putting up a fight. Because of that, Miggy feels defeated because she thinks her true self can't compete against Jian. For her part, Miggy's mother was worried about her daughter and wanted Josu's mother to talk to her, so she wouldn't get depressed and shut herself away again. But the lady tells her that she should do it herself, because it's her daughter. After all, there's no one better than your own mother to help you move forward. At night, Mir's former classmate calls her and tells her they should go together to a wedding of another classmate who was getting married. To cheer her up, he tells her that Josu will go with Jian. Miggy was jealous, so she agrees without asking much. Then Josu's former boss calls her and shows her a photo of Mrs. Rosa. She looks very different from how she is now. That's why he wants to ask her personally what happened. But when he talks to her, he starts to notice something very strange. Even though she was a famous poet, it seemed like she didn't know how to read. When he tells her, Josu says that his suspicions are true. Mrs. Rosa can't read. That's why Miggy thinks her university degree is fake. But Josu tells him not to meddle in other people's private lives. A few days later, it was the wedding day. Myre went with Miggy's ex, and Miggy went with the most popular guy in school. When they arrived, they sat at the same table as Josu and Jian. Because of that, Miggy felt very uncomfortable. For her part, Mir was with Miggy's ex. He tells her what's going on and says they'll stay at a motel because the wedding is very far away. She thinks he wants to take advantage of her, so she gets angry and gets out of the car. But in reality, it was all a trap to expose her. He had already realized that she wasn't his best friend, even at the wedding. The popular guy says he invited Miggy and her ex-boyfriend just to make fun of them. Josu gets upset and tells him that he needs to grow up already. Miggy doesn't understand what's going on. So the guy tells him that he convinced his ex to confess her love to him, all just to make fun of him. But when Josu found out, he got so angry that he ended up hitting him. When Miggy finds out about all this, he gets angry and tells the popular guy that he's pathetic, and that he should stay away from his sister. Then she runs after Josu, but since she can't catch up, she asks him to wait for her. Because of that, Jian realizes that she isn't Mir, but Miggy. Josu tells her that he already knew, and makes it clear that his heart belongs to his first love, and that she doesn't have a chance with him. Then he goes with Miggy, but he doesn't tell her that he already knows the truth. He just goes along with it, and they go home. Meanwhile, Meyer didn't want to go to the wedding, so she asked her sister's ex to take her to the strawberry farm. It turns out there was a big typhoon, and she arrived just in time to help Senji secure the farm. Then he asks her why she came back, and Meyer replies that everything out there seems fake, and the only thing that feels real is the strawberry farm. Then Senji tells her that because they spent the night together, the rumors are going to intensify. She tells him that she doesn't care anymore, but Senji says he likes the rumors about them. Then they start cooking to pass the time. She finds out that Senji is actually a very successful man, a famous stock market investor, a man she admired a lot. That's why she knew everything about him, because one day she wanted to work with stocks, just like him. Because of that, Senji tells her to work at his company, to forget everything and dedicate herself 100% to what she's passionate about. She says that even if she wanted to, she can't do it, because she feels indebted to her family and can't risk her job. Of course, for a passion that may or may not work out. The next day, Josu was supposed to meet with his former boss. He wanted to make it clear that his client doesn't want to sell her building, but his former boss threatens him. And he tells him that one way or another, in the end, he always gets what he wants. That's why he tells him he'd better convince her to sell. Otherwise, his friend will be the one who suffers the most. Josu wanted to tell her what's going on, but in the end, he prefers not to worry Meiji any further. Then, Jian calls Meiji to clear everything up once and for all. But before she arrives, a lady shows up and starts calling her all sorts of names and saying many other vulgar things. Meiji is confused, but Jian shows up and leads her away. He reveals he knows she's not Meyer and tells her to stop pretending. Thanks to that, they both work things out and realize that they broke off their friendship over a simple misunderstanding. Then, they tell us what really happened. With Meyer, it turns out that woman is the wife of her direct boss. There were rumors in the office that Meyer got involved with him, which is why the woman caused such a big scene. At the same time, Yosu went back to the village to talk to Mirai. He wanted to tell her that he already knows she switched places with her twin sister, but the girl's mother went to tell Josu's mother that her son was alone with her daughter. When she hears that, another lady says they should get ready to be in-laws, which makes both women angry and they start pulling each other's hair. Back with Josu, he wanted Mirai to tell him her side of the rumors at the office, so he could help her with her defense, but she tells him she doesn't want his help. Then, they both get a call from the hospital. Their moms had fallen down the stairs while fighting, but even though they were injured, they still had the energy to keep arguing. Because of that, Migi also arrives. But Yosu doesn't want her to find out that he already discovered her. So he pretends not to know anything. Then, Seijin also arrives. When he sees the two of them looking identical, he's very surprised and he invites everyone to eat so they can keep talking for a while. But the only one who tried to break the ice was Seijin. Then, Migi tells him that she knows his grandfather, and since they have the same attitude, they become good friends. After dinner, Mirai tells her sister that it's time to switch. And she also tells her that Josu has already found them out. Because of that, she feels very embarrassed, since they had planned a date for next week. At the same time, Myra went to the strawberry farm to say goodbye to Seijin. He thinks that he will finally follow his passion, but she tells him that he has to pay the bills and that it's little compared to what his family did for her. She confesses to him that she used to think exactly the same, but her grandfather forced her to go study abroad. He told her that she had to take risks and give it her all. No matter what happens, look, she tells him it's not the same, even though deep down she knew it was. The next day, she still hadn't left. It seemed they would change places at night. That's why Seijin takes the opportunity to tell her his story. He wanted to tell her how he went from being a successful businessman to a simple farmer. He tells her that one day he was closing a huge deal, but at the most crucial moment, his grandfather kept calling him. Since he was busy, he kept hanging up on him again and again, not knowing that it would be the last time. When his grandfather was dying, he didn't call an ambulance, but with his last strength, he called his grandson. Because of that, Seijin felt very guilty. He felt that everything he had achieved no longer made sense, so he quit and dedicated himself to taking care of his grandfather's farm, since he was the only person he really wanted to make proud. Later, Migi goes to visit her grandmother. When they reunite, both of them are very happy. Her grandmother asks her if she has finished all of Meyer's work, but Migi answers that she's not really sure. Then she tells her that her mom got hurt. When she hears that, the grandmother calls to find out how her daughter is doing. Even though she said her mother was very cold and distant, that didn't seem to be true because she was always looking out for her. When he leaves the hospital, Migi meets his best friend. He shows him his tattoo, and his reaction is very different from his twin sister's. Then he tells him everything that happened with Yosu in Seoul. He gets excited because he already knew he liked her since school. That's why he advises his friend to take the man's role and confess her feelings. First, later, both moms apologize and make peace. At night, Migi's best friend decides to step in and tells Josu everything his friend had told him. She confesses that she likes him too and tells him not to overthink it, and to confess that he likes her too. That he should take the first step and that they should be happy. But Josu tells him that he'll do it later when the time is right. His friend tells him that doesn't exist, that in life there is no perfect moment. Then, Migi asks her sister for a few more days. After that, they will move to another place. She wants to gather enough strength to quit her job. She had decided to follow Sengi's advice and do something she was truly passionate about, even though for Migi that felt a bit selfish. At night, Yosu tells Migi that he wants to see her, that he wants to do what he couldn't do 10 years ago. He follows the advice that Migi's friend gave him and confesses his feelings. Migi replies that she likes him too, but she doesn't give him a kiss or anything like that. They just say goodbye and wish each other good night. The next day, Migi returns to Seoul and Yosu goes to the hospital to take his mom home. Migi, for her part, also takes her mother home, and she takes the opportunity to ask her how she would feel if her sister quit her job. Job? To which Mrs. O replies that she would feel very bad because she would have 2 unemployed daughters. Then she goes to Seijin to give him a new project. He accepts it and tells her that they should meet at night so they can watch the stars and clear up their doubts. When night comes, he asks her if they would have met in Seoul. Miji answers that it's impossible because she's very ordinary and he probably wouldn't have even noticed her. That's why Seijin is very grateful, because meeting each other was fate. Later, Yosu arrives in Seoul and Miji went to the station to pick him up. Then they both have a sort of date, but neither of them really knew what to do. That's why Josu invites her to his house, but not for anything bad, just because he needed to take some pills. Then, while talking about their past, they remember that they had planned many activities together. But because of what happened between them, they were never able to do them. That's why Miggy tells him that now is the perfect time. So they dust off the plan they made 10 years ago and follow it step by step. The whole guide to visiting Seoul, but many of the places they wanted to go to no longer exist. Then, while they're walking, Josu runs into his former coworkers and introduces Miji as his girlfriend. But she pretends to be Maire to avoid embarrassing Josu. He asks her why she pretended to be his sister. Sister? She answers that she feels embarrassed because she doesn't have a steady job and doesn't feel like she's on Josu's level. Later, when he returns home, Josu feels really bad. His body is at its limit. No matter how hard he tries, he still has a weak body. Now we find out that Josu's mom is actually not his biological mother. His mother passed away when he was very young, and his father married another woman. She is the one he calls Mom after his father passed away. All of the lady's family was against her raising him alone, since he wasn't her biological son. But she preferred to distance herself from her family rather than abandon her son. That's why Josu always felt like a burden. One day, he told his mother to leave and to let him be alone. That very day, the lady's mother had fallen ill, and when she went to see her, she couldn't make it back home. Because of that, Josu felt that his mother had abandoned him. That's why he cried inconsolably, because even though he didn't say it, he really loved his mother very much. Since then, he always treated her well and called her mom with great affection. The next day, Mr. Park arrives at the office. He was Meyer's supposed lover, and the curious thing is that he looked exactly like his father. That's why Miggy is very surprised and she can't help but feel sad. Later, he asks to talk, and Miggy agrees because she wanted to know more about that man. That's how she finds out that he was the one in charge of the project she was working on. And also, now that he's back, he asks her to give it back to him, saying he'll take all the blame. Miggy agrees because she had to leave anyway, and she didn't want to cause trouble for her sister. At night, she asks Mir to tell her his side of the story, because that man looked a lot like her father. And that's why she couldn't help wanting to spend time with him. But Meyer says he doesn't want to discuss him. As the time to change approaches, she starts saying goodbye to the only friend she had at the office and asks him to be kind to her in the coming weeks. When she left work, Chosu was waiting for her. Miggy thought he had bad news, but actually he confesses that the day they went out he was feeling bad, but he didn't say anything because he doesn't like to be a burden, and he likes to be seen as a normal and functional person. That's why they went on another date, but this time both of them are doing well. When she gets home, the analyst follows Miggy and tells her that he has something very important to tell her. He tells her he is the brother of her former superior, who helped Meyer and expose the corruption. But because she couldn't handle the pressure, she locked herself in her room and hasn't come out until today. This makes Miggy feel bad because she did exactly the same thing when she was in school. The next day, Miggy goes to Mrs. Rose's house to say goodbye because soon she would have to switch places with her sister. Also, she was no longer in charge of the building project. That's why she says they probably won't see each other for a long time, but promises to visit occasionally. Because of that, she confesses to her that she has a son, and that she needs someone to take care of him in case something happens to her. So she asks her as a favor to take care of him, because she also grew fond of him. In exchange, she will pay her very well for her service. At night, the analyst asks Mireille to continue with the lawsuit and also to report the company's corruption. Because over this time, he has gathered information about how they favor certain people and certain companies. But Mireille tells him to do it himself, because she doesn't want to start a fight she can't win. The analyst tells her that there are fights that must be started simply because it's the right thing to do. For her part, Miji wanted to go back home, but Yosu tells her that she should stay and live with him. Since it was her first time dating, she felt uncomfortable only thinking about doing things with Yosu. When she asks him what he's thinking, he tells her that all of this is new to him, and he doesn't know how he should act. Now that they're a couple, she kisses him, and they both just go with the flow. The next day, someone had filed a complaint on the company's website. Everyone thought it was Meyer because she had reported things before, but in reality, it was the analyst. Meyer scolds him for doing something so stupid. and he tells her that if she's not going to help, then she shouldn't get involved. Later, we see why Meyer was so upset about the rumors. It turns out that at first Mr. Park was very nice and kind to her. He always helped her and took her home. And since he looked like her father, she wanted to spend more time with him. But Mr. Park misunderstood things, and one day, when he was drunk, he tried to kiss Meyer. He thought she wanted the same thing because of all the time they spent together, but she stopped him abruptly and told him not to confuse things. His wife found out about them, and because of that, the coward said that she seduced him to avoid having problems with her. Look, she asked him to tell the truth to prevent the rumors from spreading further. But the coward preferred to leave and let the whole office keep attacking her. In the afternoon, the lawyer went to Mrs. Rosa's store with the sole purpose of threatening her. He told her that it was better for her to come to the store willingly, because if not, he would reveal the secrets of her past, like, for example, her son, who is in a sanatorium. Because of that, Mrs. Rosa is left very frightened. The next day, Yosu had a job interview, and he wanted to tell Mrs. Rosa the truth. That is, that he switched places with his twin sister upon hearing the truth. Mrs. Rosa thinks that he approached her just to get the house, and that now he has teamed up with a lawyer to force her to sell. He tells her it wasn't her, but Mrs. Rosa doesn't believe him. Later, Miri was thinking about whether she should continue with the lawsuit, since the analyst had given her all the evidence he had gathered. He tells her that now it's up to her. Meyer wanted to do the right thing, but because of everything she went through, she was very afraid that nothing would change, or that things would get even worse. As had already happened in the past, Miggy was also having a hard time. That's why she pulls out her extensions to stop looking like her twin sister, and she also goes back home because she no longer had anything else to do in Seoul. She felt that everything she had experienced didn't belong to her, but to Meyer. When she returns home, she was afraid that her mother would recognize her. When her mother sees her acting as usual, she notices something strange. But before she can get more suspicious, Miggy goes to the strawberry farm. Senji tells her that he will leave the farm in her hands since he had to go to the United States. In the afternoon, Josu had a job interview, but he felt uncomfortable because they only wanted him so they could win cases against his former boss. He rejects the offer because he didn't want to be used for something so superficial. Later, when Miggy returns home, her mother tells her that she already found them out and wants her to explain why she switched places with her sister. But Miggy was fed up and tells her that it's over and to forget that they switched places. Then her mother asks her why she came back, and Miggy confesses that she doesn't want to leave her alone, nor her grandmother. Her mother tells her not to worry about them and to start living her own life. Because if she stays because of her, it will only make her feel like a bad mother. Later, Miri goes to see her former boss. She apologizes for having left all that burden on her alone. Meyer tells her that she shouldn't apologize because she didn't do anything wrong. She was just another victim of that corrupt company. Then, when she returns home, Mr. Park was waiting for her. This time, she was prepared and recorded their entire conversation. But Mr. Park shows his true colors, and in the end, he ends up attacking her. He tells her that she should accept the offer willingly, or else things will get ugly. Luckily, Miggy arrives and gives Mr. Park a good beating. Because of the big scandal, they are taken to the police station, and Josu has to go to get them released. But Mr. Park refused to reach an agreement. So look, he tells the police officers that he has already filed a harassment complaint, and this time he won't withdraw it, but will file it again. The next day, Miggy was worried about her sister because she knew that Mr. Park would play the victim again. And just like the bastard said, once again, he claimed that she was taking revenge for what happened a while ago, but this time, she was determined. She decided his nasty comments wouldn't affect her anymore, and the analyst said she could rely on him. Meyer thanks him and tells him that she will also continue with her sister's complaint, but she will do it when the time is right. For her part, Miggy goes to Josu to thank him for helping her, but he was upset because she got into a fight with a man much bigger than her. But Miggy, embarrassed, tells him that she won't do it again. And she also tells him that now he'll see her more often because she'll be staying in Seoul for a while. For his part, the lawyer had published an ad about Mrs. Rosa and her terrible secret. She was angry because she could lose everything. The lawyer wanted Mrs. Rosa's true identity to be revealed, so that her son with a disability would become the owner of everything. And that way he could buy the building without so many problems. The next day, they had presented their case on television, so now the police would conduct an investigation. She was accused of identity theft. Mrs. Rosa was scared because the truth about her dark past was coming to light. When Yosu and Miggy found out, they went to see her. But she didn't want to talk to anyone. She felt like everything was over. For her part, Meyer was determined to go ahead with the complaint, which is why her co-workers were speaking badly about her again. But when she left work, Senji went to pick her up in a nice sports car. He said he bought that car just to get her attention. He wanted to finish the conversation they left unfinished, but Miggy told him they'd better leave it for another day when he's not in his sports car. The next day, he takes her to a bunch of businesses and tells her that all of them were his friends, all of them were office workers. But thanks to Senji, they found the courage to follow their dreams and have already opened their own businesses. He wanted Meyer to do the same, to have the courage to follow her dreams. Later, Miggy finds a summons from the prosecutor's office, but Jozu tells him to leave it where he found it, because he can't help Mrs. Rosa since she didn't ask for their help. But Miggy wanted to help her, even if she didn't want it. When he reads the letter, he realizes that his former boss was behind all of it, so he goes to confront him for being so immoral and corrupt. Meanwhile, Miggy kept trying to contact Mrs. Rosa, but she didn't want to fight anymore. She was preparing everything for when she lost the case. She wanted to pay the full amount for her son's hospital bill, but the nurses told her that's not how things work. Luckily, Miggy arrives to try to defend her, but she gets upset and tells him not to get involved. Then he asks her to let him help her. He doesn't care that she's not the real Kim Rosa. At night, Yosu also wants to help her and asks her to tell him everything so he can prepare her defense. The lady tells us that her real name is Sang-won. She grew up in the same orphanage as Kim Rosa, but they were very different. Rosa was a very charismatic and friendly girl, while she herself was very withdrawn and distracted due to life's circumstances. She never learned to read, and that caused her a lot of problems, but her friend Rosa decided not to leave her alone. She would read everything for her and help her whenever she could. Since they spent a lot of time together, people said they were twin sisters. When she entered university, things changed a lot. Rosa made new friends, and since Mrs. Sang-won didn't know how to read, she couldn't join their poetry sessions. That's why, so she wouldn't hold them back. She moved to another city. That way, her friend could grow as a poet. Mrs. Sang-won started working in the kitchen since reading wasn't needed there, but one day she called her friend to see how she was doing. That's when she found out that Kim Rosa had moved, and since then, she lost track of her. Many years later, Mrs. Sang-won found her in a market. Her face was all bruised, and she had a disabled child on her back. When she saw her so haggard, she realized that she was no longer the Rosa she remembered so fondly. Now she was someone completely different. It turns out her husband used to beat her, and since she was an orphan, she had nowhere to go. Even the police themselves told her to go back to her husband and be more obedient. That's why she took her to live with her for a while. They were very happy until her husband found them. He was very abusive and he wanted to get rid of both of them. Sang-won tried to defend her, but then that bastard attacked her. That's why the real Kim Rosa hit him very hard, and because of that, the man lost his life. Since she had a baby, Mrs. Sang-won decided to take all the blame so that Kim Rosa could take care of her child. When she got out of prison, things got worse. The real Kim Rosa wrote poems to make a living, but that wasn't enough. Sang-won tried to get a job, but because of her criminal record, no one wanted to hire her. That's why they decided to move, to start over from scratch. Both of them used the name Kim Rosa. That's how they both started to recover. They worked very hard and managed to buy the restaurant. But misfortune would catch up with them once again. Rosa had cancer, and at that time, it was a death sentence. That's why she decided to leave everything to her best friend, even her name. She told her that Sang-won would die with her. That way, she wouldn't have to carry the criminal record. And she could take care of her son since her husband's family wouldn't look after him and would rather throw him out on the street. That's why Mrs. Sang-won agreed, because it was her best friend's last wish. With that information, Yosu manages to build a good defense, since the real Rosa had left a will where she genuinely left everything to her dear friend. Also, in the will, it clarifies that even though things are in the name of Kim Rosa, the real owner of everything was Sang-won. With that will, they wouldn't send her to prison anymore. But she still had to prove that she didn't use the name Kim Rosa for her own benefit. That's why Miggy contacted all the beneficiaries of the Kim Rosa scholarship, so they could testify that they genuinely received her help. That's how they managed to dismiss the accusation. Thanks to that, Mrs. Sang-won smiled with relief. But once again, misfortune would come knocking at her door. But this time it was for Yosu, who had started having problems with his ear. Since he didn't want to be a burden to anyone, he pretends that everything is fine and then distances himself from Migi. She gets worried and wants to be with him, but Josu shuts the door in her face. His good ear had started to fail, and apparently he would soon be completely deaf. The doctor tells him they can try to fix it, but most likely the treatment will fail. Meanwhile, at Meyer's company, the prosecutor's office had started an audit, and thanks to this, all the cases of corruption would be uncovered. It turns out it was Sen Ye who used his influence to help Myri leave that job as soon as possible. She thanks him and tells him that now she'll be able to resign. Her coworker thanks her for avenging his sister, but she tells him that she only did what was right and that she won't stay to watch her bad bosses pay for their crimes. Josu, for his part, managed to convince his former boss to help Meyer with a harassment complaint. Although the lawyer was upset, he felt a lot of affection for his former apprentice, so he was willing to help him. Then he goes to see Mrs. Kim. Since things were already getting resolved, she stopped being defensive. Deep down, she was a very sweet and somewhat shy lady. Josu warns her that he won't be able to see her for a while. Because of his condition, he needs to take care of himself before continuing to work. Mrs. Kim says she understands and urges him to get treatment soon. Also, she is sure that Miggy will help him. But he tells her that he still doesn't know if he should tell her, because he doesn't want to be a burden to her. At night, Miggy meets with him. They both wanted to eat together, but the place they wanted to go to had a lot of stairs. And because of Yozu's condition, they couldn't go up them. This made him feel even worse because he felt that Miggy would have to give up many things to be with him. So at the end of their date, he tells Miggy they should break up. But he says it in a very harsh way so that Miggy will believe him. Although in the end, it doesn't help much, because Miggy asks him to tell the truth. Josu can't lie to him, so he tells him everything. He tells her that he doesn't want to be a burden to her. He hates when people feel sorry for him. And he doesn't want his girlfriend to see him getting worse day by day. That's why he tells her that it's best to break up. Miggy says she doesn't want to end things, but Yosu tells her exactly what she told him when they were in school. When she hears this, Miggy can't say anything to him. In the end, Josu ends up leaving. Later, Miggy goes back to her sister's house, very depressed. Miggy tells her everything, but her eyes can't cry anymore because she knows exactly how Josu feels. Because at some point, she also felt that way. Meanwhile, Josu also gets depressed, turns everything off, and locks himself in his room. Days later, Meyer hands in her resignation letter. For her part, Miggy was feeling really bad and didn't know what to do from that moment on. But her best friend traveled all the way to Seoul to cheer her up a bit and also to buy some sneakers. He asks why Josu left her. She explains they mutually agreed to separate and he didn't break up with her. But her best friend knew she was lying, so being a good friend, he starts teasing her. In the village, Miggy's grandmother was having hallucinations, so her mother quickly goes to see her. Mrs. O had always believed that her mother didn't love her, but when she sees her hallucinating, she discovers that's not true. Her mother only wanted to protect her, that's why she acted so harshly. Meanwhile, Miggy was feeling down, although her best friend was with her to cheer her up. Why does he see her so down? He suggests going back home and trying again, since Seoul is very expensive, but Miggy tells him she won't go back, that she wants to stay in Seoul to start from scratch. The next day, Mary packs her things and her classmates start saying it was about time for her to leave. In the elevator, she runs into her former boss. He threatens her and says that no matter where she goes, he'll make sure she doesn't get a good job. But Myri didn't want to work in the public sector anymore, so she tells him she doesn't care anymore, and that he'll have to pay for everything he did. In the village, Josu's mother receives a call from the doctor. It turns out her son had turned off his phone and stopped going to the hospital. That's why she immediately goes to Seoul and brings the police with her to break down his door because she feared the worst. But it turns out Yosu was just sleeping. His mother scolds him for not going to the hospital and for giving up without even trying to get better. He tells her that his condition has no solution, and that's why it's not worth trying. His mother says he should have at least informed her, but Josu tells her not to worry and to focus on her own life. When she hears those words, his mother gets angry and tells him that a mother would never abandon her child, but he replies that he's not even her son. She gets very angry and tells him that even though they don't share blood, they share something much more valuable, an unconditional love. She is sure that he loves her too, and that's why she can't abandon him. She also confesses to him that without her son, her life has no meaning. And if he leaves her, then she would have no reason to go on living. At the same time, Myri goes to the hospital with her mother to tell her that she quit her job. Myri thought her mother would scold her, but in the end, she tells her that she trusts her and that she must have her reasons. Then, Mira goes to Senji to ask him if he has already found someone to manage the strawberry farm. He tells her no because he has been waiting for her all this time. Meanwhile, Miggy was with Mrs. Kim planning the renovation of her shop. Suddenly, while checking her mail, she sees a note from the court with Josu's name on it. When she reads it, she can't help but feel sad. When she sees her, Mrs. Kim tells her to go look for him, to act like she always does, and, if necessary, to stand at his door until he opens it. Miggy tells her that she can't do it because she understands how Yosu feels. But Mrs. Kim tells her not to stop trying, and to be the same stubborn girl who managed to change his life. For his part, Josu was with his mother. She, being a good mom, organizes everything so that her son can go to the doctor, even if she's no longer around. Then, his mother asks him why he wanted to face that problem alone. He tells her that this way, only he would suffer. Josu was so good that he didn't want anyone else to suffer. His mother tells him that he's just like his father. At night, Miggy wanted to leave his traumas behind so he could help Josu. That's why she closes her door and manages to open it without any problems. This way, the girl who had been trapped in her room for 2 years would no longer be there. When she opens the door, she decides to follow Josu, but he had already gone to look for her. He apologizes to her for pushing her away, and Miggy also apologizes for letting him go. Then, they both promise not to drift apart again. At the same time, we see that Mireille's superior leaves her room after receiving a note from her friend. When she finds out that she had the courage to report her superiors, she decides not to be left behind. She also wanted to be brave. After making up, Josu gives Miggy a promise ring. He tells her that he doesn't know what will happen with his health from now on, but he wants to be with her no matter what happens. Then we see that Seijin arranges everything with Mireille. He wanted her to follow her dream and work with him in the United States, but Mireille didn't want to do it. She felt that she hadn't earned it, and besides, she wanted to do things her own way. In Seoul, Miggy helps Mrs. Rosa with the restaurant renovation. She was now much kinder and seemed like a different person, since she had decided to use her real name. Also, she wanted to learn to read. Even though she was older, she wanted to read the poems her friend had left behind. Then she offers Miggy to inherit everything since she had no one else, but Miggy says no, that she already has something in mind, and that she would rather just visit her from time to time. At night, Mireille says goodbye to her mother. Now she would go live alone at the strawberry farm. Her mother didn't want her to leave, and also she thought that working at that farm was a step back for her career. But since her daughter had struggled in Seoul, she chose to support her, despite her doubts. The next day, Mireille tells her sister. She gets excited and congratulates her for making a decision, thinking about herself. Then she talks to her grandmother. She was a bit down, but she asks Miggy not to come back to the village, to stay in Seoul and do whatever she wants. Later, we also see that the mothers get along better now. Miggy's mom says that her daughter is in Seoul. Josu's mom says that she'll probably meet a lot of men. But Mrs. O gets angry and says that Miggy is still like a child. At night, she goes to visit her, but finds her daughter kissing Josu. Because of that, she gets angry with Miggy and asks Josu to go home. Then she tells her daughter to think it over, because Josu is not a completely healthy person. But she doesn't say it in a bad way, but so that she treats him better because she had him moving furniture even though he was sick. She also warns her to be more mature and not start a relationship with Yosu only to leave when things get tough. Meanwhile, Seijin is also packing his things. He had already gotten over the mourning for his grandfather. Besides, he knew his grandfather wouldn't be happy if he stayed at home to grow strawberries. The next day, Miggy's mom goes with her to sign her first lease. She wanted to be with her at that important moment. When they arrive at the place, Mrs. O checks every inch. When it's time to sign, her mother gives her 50,000 won more so she can pay less rent. She knew her daughter could do it on her own, but she wanted to help her with her first contract. Meanwhile, Mir went to talk to the analyst. He tells her that the office manager was fired. The director ended up demoted and was sent to the worst office in the company. Her sister also already left her room and started going to therapy. Josu also makes peace with his mother and brings her flowers at her work so she can show them off to all her friends. He used to feel embarrassed to do those kinds of things, but he does it because he loves his mother very much. Later, he tells her that he is dating Miggy. His mom doesn't understand it, but she knows her son is very smart and says that if he loves her, it must be for a reason. Back with Miggy, she invites her mother to eat, and there she takes the opportunity to talk with her. Mrs. O tells her about her youth. She tells her that she had many dreams, that she wanted to go to art school and travel around the world, but she ended up getting pregnant and had to work. She was tough on them to prevent the same thing from happening to her daughters. Then she realized they were alike, which might explain their frequent arguments. The next day, we see that Meyer had taken Mr. Park to court. He apologizes to her and begs her to forgive him, but the lawyer tells him that apologizing is fine. But that doesn't solve anything. Then Miura goes to say goodbye to Seijin. He was on the plane, but since he liked Meyer a lot, he decides to get off so he can see her one last time. She thanks him for all his help, and they both promise to stay in touch. Days later, Yosu had to be admitted to the hospital to treat his ear. Migi promises to send him messages every day so he doesn't get bored. But Yosu's mother arrives suddenly and Migi gets very nervous. But she already knew they were dating. So she thanks her for visiting her son, but warns her not to hurt him, because he's her only son. Then Migi gets a call from her mother, who gives her the terrible news that her grandmother had a heart attack. The doctors managed to save her life, but there wasn't much they could do anymore. She only had a few days left to live. That's why they had to take her home. Migi didn't want to give up, but his grandmother wanted to go home. When they took her, Migi wanted to spend as much time as possible with his grandmother. When his grandmother falls asleep, his sister asks him for help on the farm, but Migi tells her he can't, because he wants to start college. Even though he felt old, he wanted to try. He wanted to get his college degree. For her part, Mrs. Kim was learning to read. It turns out her friend had left her an entire notebook with poems just for her. Days later, Migi's grandmother gets up and suddenly she's very lively. She starts putting on makeup and packing her bags. Migi asks her where she's going, and her grandmother just tells her it's time to go on vacation. Her grandmother entered her dreams to say goodbye. At first, Migi doesn't want her to leave, but her grandmother tells her that it's time. So Migi asks her to take good care of herself and to come visit her from time to time. When she wakes up, her grandmother is already gone. Sometime later, we see that Migi started studying very hard. Yosu learned sign language, and Meire worked very hard on her farm. Senji went back to the stock market, but he kept in touch with Meyer. Sometime later, Migi failed her entrance exam, but she wasn't going to give up. So she enrolled in an academy to try again for the next exam. When the results were posted, everyone got ready to see them with her, and this time she managed to pass. A year later, Miere had started to find success on the farm. Now her strawberries were the best in town. She even got a very important buyer. It was Jion, who had opened her own business and was also doing well. Josu's hearing hadn't gotten worse, but thanks to learning sign language, he was able to communicate better with his customers. Migi, for his part, was attending classes, and after what he had experienced, he couldn't stand seeing bullies. So, whenever he could, he fought against them. He also helped shy girls to become stronger and more confident. When his class ended, Josu arrived. It turns out that at the university, a very special person would read the new poems of Kim Ro-sa. Mrs. Sunwoo had learned to read very well, and since the poems in the notebook were about them, she published and read them for everyone, since they were too beautiful to be kept hidden. Later, we see that Meyer's superior had overcome her traumas and had returned to work. This made Meyer very happy since she seemed like a different person. When she returned home, she noticed that someone was following her. It turned out to be Seijin, who had come back just to see her. Because of that, she goes with him to the strawberry farm, and she wouldn't go to sleep with her sister anymore. That's why Mijin takes the opportunity to stay and sleep with Yosu. While checking his clothes, she discovers an engagement ring. When she sees that Yosu wanted to take the next step, she starts asking him what he thinks about marriage. Josu tells her that, according to his mother, it's the best thing that can happen to a couple. But Migi tells him that first, each person should know what they want to do with their life. Josu asks if she knows what she wants to do, and she says she wants to be a therapist but would need to study for years. Josu tells her that he already waited for her for 10 years, and that he could wait another 10 if necessary. When they were about to get into mischief, her mother calls her and tells her that she must go home immediately, and that she should bring Josu with her. Apparently, the ladies decided to remodel their houses. While that's happening, they would live together, so they need space, and she asked them to clean their rooms. Josu wanted to tell them that they would soon be living together, but Migi tells her that it's not the right time, that they should do it when they're not living together. So Migi cleans her room, and with that, she closes a chapter of her life. When she looks out the window, she sees a little bird staring at her. And that's when she realizes it's her grandmother, who had come to visit her. That's how this story ends. Thank you so much for watching the video until the end. Let me know in the comments what you thought about this series. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any summaries. See you in the next story.